All right, so as Joe Biden's major social spending agenda continues to sit in a virtual legislative graveyard thanks to a handful of corporate ghouls within his own party, the First Lady Jill Biden is going around the country doing somewhat of an apology tour to basically explain how her husband has completely failed to pass one of his major campaign promises. So I got a good breakdown here from Common Dreams' Julia Conley, who says that despite 2020 promise, Joe Biden confirms that free community college plan is dead, and it's dead pretty much along with the entirety of Build Back Better. So let's just get into this because I think this gives us a perfect perspective in terms of just how delusional and pathetic the Joe Biden administration has been so far. So she says, confirming that the Biden administration has abandoned its efforts to pass tuition-free community college, a signature campaign promise, First Lady Joe Biden on Monday offered a stark reminder, according to one critic, of how low we, the people, are on the list of U.S. priorities. Okay? Notice how she includes herself in we the people as if her husband is not the president of the United States. I mean, how are you going to include yourself as in like you're some average American sitting on the sidelines just witnessing this all unfold? It's literally your own husband's corruption and the policies that he has enacted over the entirety of his career, like the '06 bankruptcy bill and other pieces of legislation that led to the current problem with student debt building up and the problem of the costliness of public colleges and community colleges right now. It's your own husband's corruption that has largely led to the current situation that we have right now, and that remains to be an obstacle to actually solving these problems. And yet she somehow includes herself in the we the people thing. It's just, kind of laughable at face value, but that's just the beginning. We continue here with them saying that the First Lady spoke at the Community College National Legislative Summit in Washington, D.C., telling attendees that President Joe Biden has not found a way to keep the community college provision in the Build Back Better Act, his social spending and climate package, as Democrats continue to negotiate the bill. So not really sure what they mean here exactly in terms of continue to negotiate the bill, because as I've told you guys multiple times on this channel already, Joe Manchin has come out and he's been saying this basically for months that Build Back Better is completely dead. Now, they might mean that they're still negotiating some individual policies that could be passed as standalone things in the future, but again, we don't really know where the fuck Joe Manchin wants to go on that front or what he would be willing to pass, if anything at all. We just know that now apparently community college is absolutely not going to be one of those policies. And I mean, again, this shows you how absolutely pathetic Joe Biden really is, okay? President Joe Biden has not found a way to keep community college in Build Back Better, hasn't found a way. What did he try? I mean, literally, what strategies did he actually try to make sure that it was included? Because again, you have a handful of corporate ghouls within his own party that are against this bill, presumably, or against free community college being included in this bill, presumably. So what has he done to try to get them to come on board? Well, we've seen this entire process unfold, and basically what it's looked like is they have these closed door, behind the scenes communications with each other between President Joe Biden, Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, the rest of the ghouls, and they don't open this up to the public. Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, they both publicly said many times that they don't negotiate in public, whatever the fuck that means as a public representative. That's like all you should be doing. But I mean, they've had these closed door negotiations that have resulted in nothing. I mean, Joe Biden basically gave Joe Manchin a pen and said, here, write whatever legislation you want. Joe Manchin wrote the legislation that he wanted and said, I want a $1.7 trillion bill, and then he went back on that. So Joe Manchin is not even in favor of what Joe Manchin was proposing. So, how are you going to say that you've tried everything when you have not even gone to West Virginia, you have not even gone to Arizona and tried to use your position in the bully pulpit as the president of the United States to try to get them to fall in line? All you've been doing is these bullshit, bad faith, behind the scenes negotiations that have resulted in absolutely nothing, and then you're just going to turn around and say, well, I guess we tried everything. I mean, again, just completely pathetic. They haven't tried damn near any of the actual strategies that somebody would use if they actually cared about getting this policy passed. But they continue with the quote here saying that Joe has also had to make compromises. Okay, compromises, said Biden, a longtime educator who currently teaches at a community college, and says Congress hasn't passed the Build Back Better legislation yet, and free community college is no longer part of that package. So again, Build Back Better is not getting passed. It's dead. Joe Manchin came out and he openly said that. And because we know that Joe Biden apparently has exhausted all of his, capabilities as the president to get Build Back Better passed, then it's not going to pass. I mean, that's the end of it. There's no, legitimate reason to try to keep your hopes up as if something magic is going to come in and save the day. This is just them throwing their hands up after trying basically absolutely nothing. And again, just to put it in perspective in terms of how stupid this move is, okay? First off, it's overwhelmingly popular, okay? So broad support for tuition-free college among especially women, young people, Black and Hispanic adults, but it's across the board. I mean, you see here, if you add up all of these different, combining factors here, you get 63 on net support for free community college, okay? So this is what the people support. This is the will of the American people. What are you doing to actually go out and get this enacted? Nothing. He's doing absolutely nothing from the bully pulpit. He's doing nothing as the president of the United States to actually get this passed. But you see that it would be an overwhelming political win on top of just being a very common sense policy to enact. But again, just some more context here in terms of how pathetic this is, because the part of this is that, you can't even make the argument reasonably that we can't afford free community college, right? You would think in your head, oh, maybe that's something that's disastrously expensive or something like that. But even relative to other things like the military budget, which we're about to get into, or even just relative to any spending at all, it's almost nothing, okay? So just a little bit of context here. They say from Vox that President Joe Biden's promise to offer free community college to students across the country, a plan which he said would boost the middle class and help the United States compete with other countries, fell through last month when he negotiated down from 3.5 to 1.75. Now the 1.75 again is completely off the table. But the plan would have spent $45.5 billion for states to offer two years of free community college tuition to every student for the next 5 years. So in other words, $45.5 billion over 5 years. That's less than $10 billion per year. Okay, $10 billion per year. And they say, just to give more context in terms of the current situation in student spending on college, they say college tuition has risen dramatically in the past few decades. The average student receiving the Pell Grant, which is what Biden is basically focusing on instead of focusing on free community college, a need-based federal program for low-income students, could only afford 41% of 2-year public colleges and just 23% of 4-year public colleges in the 2018-2019 school year. And that's before the fees, books, and room and board expenses that students must cover, or the struggles that community college students face to stay in school as they battle housing and food insecurity, among other challenges. So again, the cost has risen dramatically over the last couple of decades, and people obviously can't even afford the free, or can't even afford the community or public colleges in any reasonable way, even with these, Pell Grants and other measly little crumbs that they throw at the problem. So again, it's a problem that absolutely needs to be solved if we, care about not punishing students for the crime of trying to get a higher education and saddling them with debt that they might hold for the rest of their life if they are ever able to pay it off. And all of those consequences that we see right here are to prevent what? $45.5 billion over the next 5 years, okay? Less than $10 billion a year to solve these problems, okay? $10 billion a year, as we just saw the Pentagon get $25 billion more dollars than they were even asking for. Okay, so this is just for 1 year, but let's just go ahead and check in with the latest on our military spending. So they say here from Responsible Statecraft, in May, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin received a Department of Defense budget request for the new fiscal year of 2022 totaling $715 billion, $11.3 billion above the current fiscal year's total. And the Pentagon and the Biden administration broadly proposed increasing defense spending even as the nation winds down its military operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, confronts more pressing non-defense crises like the COVID pandemic, and fiscal hawks will point out faces record level of debt and deficit levels. And unfortunately, things just got worse for advocates of a smaller defense budget because in late July, the Senate Armed Services Committee decided to add a whopping $25 billion to the Pentagon budget at a hearing that was closed to the public. So again, $25 billion that was passed by the Senate Armed Services Committee by a vote of 25-1, okay, an overwhelming majority, only Elizabeth Warren voted against this, but a vote of 25-1, and we can't even get the majority of the or we can get the majority, but we can't even get the entirety of the Democratic Party. We can't even get the majority of our Congress to pass free community college that would have cost significantly less than this per year. Okay, again, it's less than $10 billion per year cost for free community college for everybody, and they just shot out $25 billion out of their goddamn asses to the Pentagon for what? For nothing, just in a handout to defense contractors, okay? $25 billion in 1 year. And they're telling us simultaneously we can't afford the $10 billion per year for free community college. It's just an absolute pathetic joke. And of course, we know the corrupting influences that exist on the Senate Armed Services Committee that they're talking about there. At least 15 lawmakers who shape U.S. defense policy have investments in military contractors. So when you see the 25-1 vote for an increase to the already inflated military budget, you see why that's happening, okay? It's because they want more money to go into a slush fund for defense contractors that they themselves have direct financial ties to, okay? So again, just brazen corruption at both levels, both in terms of protecting the debt problem that we have on student debt that is continuing to build up, and also on obviously the other aspects of where our money is actually going. And they continue to turn around with ghouls like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema pretending to give a shit about fiscal responsibility or the debt and the deficit. I mean, I literally just saw a story come out the other day that Joe Manchin every morning has one of his secretaries text him an update of what the national debt is sitting at, okay? Meanwhile, did we have a single comment that Joe Manchin came out condemning this military budget or condemning the $25 billion that they just threw out their asses at the Pentagon? I mean, did we hear a single peep out of him? No, of course we didn't, because he doesn't give a shit about fiscal responsibility. He just gives a shit about making sure that wasteful spending and government spending in general only serves the capitalist class that funnels money into his campaign and only serves his own personal financial interests. So again, it's very clear where the priorities of our government actually lie. It's not with we the people, as Jill Biden liked to include herself with. It's we the defense contractors and private military contractors that are making out with half of our discretionary budget, where we are continuously told that we can't afford a measly $45 billion over the next 5 years for free community college. Okay, again, just completely pathetic. And on top of all of this, all right, not just has Joe Biden completely failed to pass this free community college plan that he promised the American people, but there's also shit that he doesn't even have the excuse of blaming Congress for, because you always get these liberals who come out and they say, well, what do you want him to do? You can't bully Manchin too hard, you can't bully Sinema too hard, or you're going to drive them away to the Republican Party or some bullshit like that. Who gives a fuck? But you can't even make an excuse like that for something like student debt, which again is a problem that is continuing to be compounded by the fact that we do not have free community college. Okay, so again, just as a reminder, Biden can and should cancel $50,000 in student debt. I think he should wipe the entire slate clean, okay? But even Chuck Schumer, another neoliberal ghoul, even he is saying that Biden not only does have the authority to cancel student debt unilaterally without Congress, but he's also saying you should cancel at least $50,000 worth of it, okay? So, getting outflanked by Chuck Schumer is absolutely embarrassing, especially from a guy who they advertised and told us was apparently going to be the next FDR, right? Okay, completely delusional and pathetic, but, at least Schumer is pushing for something like this. Meanwhile, the Joe Biden administration is still blaming Congress for the inaction on student debt. We had this from last September. Psaki blames Congress for lack of student debt relief, says Biden would happily sign a bill. See, here's the problem. Again, you don't need a fucking bill. He could just sign an executive order and go over and talk to Secretary of Education and just go and simply do it. You could just sign an executive order and that would be that. At the end of the day, that's what he has the power to do. So listen, I mean, again, at the end of the day, this just puts it into perspective in terms of how absolutely pathetic the Joe Biden administration has been so far. I mean, the First Lady is going around the country doing an apology tour and saying, well, I guess we tried everything. We couldn't get one of our major promises along with half of our other major promises that we ran on because a couple of ghouls within our own party are apparently blocking the entirety of the power that the president has at his disposal. But we know that that's not the case and that Joe Biden hasn't used even a mild fraction of the actual power that he does have at his disposal. He's still not using the bully pulpit. He's still not using the executive orders that he could be using. And, this is part of the reason why young people are jumping ship from the Democratic Party and why they are slated to get absolutely obliterated in 2022 and 2024.